Welcome to this special edition of the Ril Dil Podcast, episode 988, titled Run, Run, Run. We'll talk about that later on, of course, in the podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ril Gerald Quinn, as we have just recorded this on a Sunday, as I have just watched the Washington Commanders. And of course, before we get into that, you can always like, subscribe, or share this podcast. The podcast is available with anywhere where all podcasts are available. So certainly we appreciate all your support. We immediately get into the game of the week, which was not hard in these divisional rounds, as this was the only competitive game out of the five games that we've seen. Of course, you have Minnesota and the Rams, which we played in Glendale, Arizona, because of the tragic wildfires that are happening in the LA area. So that game was played on Monday night, but this was I mean, this was the game of the week by default. The rest of those games, the rest of these wild card games were decided by in double digits. Excellent, very good game, high level quarterback play game. The Commanders come out on top, 23-20. You get a field goal that gets kicked, 28-yard field goal that hits the upright, points off the upright, and for thankfully for the Commanders, goes in. Otherwise, they would have been headed to overtime. And the story of this game is, to me, the story of the season for the Washington Commanders. It is the brilliance of one Jaden Daniels, who, as a rookie, has come in and is doing stuff that, we don't see rookies, we don't see 3 or 4 or 5 year veteran quarterbacks do. On the road, he comes in, plays a near flawless game, no turnovers, took the check downs, drove the team down the field to set up the game winning field goal. He outplayed Baker Mayfield. Baker, who and I, you were waiting. As a fan of the Commanders, I was waiting for Baker to turn the ball over. Baker, despite the fact that Baker played great this season, and played at frankly an MVP. Baker Mayfield played in a normal year, he would have been considered, would have got some MVP consideration. But he can put the ball on the ground. He can throw it up for grabs. 16 interceptions, a number of fumbles. I was waiting, and it came at the perfect time. He turns the ball over, changes the whole complexion of the game. Washington down 17-13, and frankly was reeling at that point. The momentum was clearly on Tampa Bay's side. Turns the ball over. That leads to a Washington touchdown. Tampa Bay does get to go down the field for a game tying field goal to make it 20-20. And Washington gets the ball back, and Jaden Daniels does what a championship quarterback does, what a veteran Hall of Fame type quarterback does, is he makes sure that his team had the ball last and either set up either get the game winning touchdown or a game winning field goal. Tampa Bay never saw the ball. Once they tied the game, that was the object, forced them to use their timeouts. He had the key run on a third down, on a critical third and short. He had a critical third and short run that, in essence, put the game away before Gonzalez kicks, barely makes the field goal for Washington. Washington gets the win 23-20. The first playoff win, and this is how putrid and how inept this franchise has been in the past couple of decades. First playoff win since 2006, since January 7th, 2006, when they took out the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 17-10. That game was an ugly game. That game was ugly to watch. I remember the game very well. They only had 120 yards of offense, the lowest output for a winning team in the history of the playoffs. Only 120 yards of offense. Defensive game, to say the least, but a lot of bad offense as well in that particular game. That was because Mark Brunell, Santana Moss, those guys, the late great Sean Taylor was also on that team. Matter of fact, I think Sean Taylor had a touchdown return, a fumble recovery for a touchdown to help Washington go up 14-0 in that particular game. That's the last playoff win Washington had. You're talking about 19 years ago, and in one season, you come in with a different owner, different coach, different general manager, different the whole nine, the quarterback, basically a different roster. And they have changed the culture in just one year. and you have a guy under center who is going to be hopefully around for a long time. Hope he stays injury free. You have a guy who, if you put the right pieces around him, if you continue to build draft well, that without question can be a championship quarterback. Uh, this year in the fourth quarter and overtime, Jaden Daniels has 13 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions. He Of course, he was perfect in the Atlanta game in overtime, 5 and 5 with the touchdown. We saw what he did against the Eagles the previous week with the 5 touchdowns and the great comeback in the fourth quarter. He's been Washington has won now seven games at basically at the buzzer or at the last possession. So they've lived in these close games, won a ton of these close games. Um, and frankly feel comfortable in these close games. I thought that this was absolutely a winnable game for them. Tampa Bay, 10-7 has been up and down all season long. Tampa Bay has some excellent individual players with Evans, and when you talked about Baker Mayfield, I like the running back Irvin, who's had a very good rookie season in his own right. But frankly, I didn't think I now what I didn't think I don't think Tampa playing in Tampa Bay is a great home field advantage for the Buccaneers, to be honest with you. And it wasn't. There had to be at least, I don't know, maybe 10 to 15,000 Washington fans. I mean, you could hear the Commander fans. And you know, that tells you how much this culture has shifted. The Washington Commander fans we're used to having it on the other way around. We're used to having teams come into Northwest Stadium and take over the stadium and cheer with their whoever. It's not just Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. Some of these national teams or Dallas. I'm talking about teams like Tennessee and teams that you would not think that would come in with their own fans and take over the stadium. That was not the case in this game. The case in this game, Washington fans, frankly, in certain different parts of the game, actually uh, took over Tampa Bay Stadium. So that just shows you how much this culture and this franchise has shifted into the right direction and shifted. Now, we'll talk about next week. It is you're playing against the Super Bowl favorites. By Vegas is Super Bowl favorites, not my Super Bowl favorites, but Vegas is Super Bowl favorites in the Lions. But we'll get to that. But in terms of this game, listen, I thought not Dan Campbell, excuse me. I thought Dan Quinn played it well. He was aggressive. They ran the ball. They didn't, they really didn't force any. I mean, defensively, they make the adjustment. They make the adjustment because Lattimore was absolutely getting torched by Mike Evans. Listen, I can make a case that they made that adjustment. They should have made that adjustment even in the first half. Lattimore was once a great cornerback. He was once an all-pro caliber quarterback. He's not that guy right now. Now, maybe next year with some rehab and and a full training camp with the team and he gets fully healthy, he can return to that player. He's not that player right now. Mike Evans absolutely had Lattimore. He ate his lunch. He destroyed Lattimore, and they make that move. They don't make that move, they might not have won this game. They decide to put Lattimore on the other receiver, double team Evans, and it really double team Evans. And to me, that was a move that probably should have came even earlier in the game because he was absolutely torching Lattimore, either catching the balls on him or forcing or getting pass interference calls, which he did during the game. So I thought that from a strategic standpoint, Washington stuck to the run. You have a situation where Washington in the game ran the ball 33 times. Now, again, they didn't run it. They didn't run it effectively as far as yards per carry. They only averaged 2.5 yards per carry. Tampa Bay is an excellent run defense. They are hard to run against, especially guys like Vita Bay. They've always been hard to run against, even in years where they haven't been, where they struggle, or they haven't been or they haven't been on the Super Bowl level, which has been basically the last 2 years, even though they've won the division 4 straight years. But they've always been, they are always tough to run the ball against. So you knew Washington was going to struggle to run the ball effectively against Tampa Bay, but they had to stick with the run. They did stick with it. They had 33 rushes for 82 yards, 33 rushes, 35 passes. Tampa Bay actually outrushed Washington 101 to 82. But those 33 carries are big because what they did is that they helped Washington control the clock with the time of possession. Washington had the ball for 35 minutes. Tampa Bay did not have the ball a lot. Baker Mayfield only attempted 18 passes, and in this game, Tampa Bay only had 44 plays total to Washington. Washington has 69 plays to Tampa Bay's 44. They outgained Tampa Bay 350 to 284. Um, and they got the one turnover that end up being, to me, the biggest play of the game. That turnover really changed the complexion of the game. They go for it on fourth down, get the game. They go for it. Washington goes for it on fourth down to get up, to go up 20-17 before again Tampa Bay comes down, comes back and ties the game. But that fumble exchange with Baker Mayfield was huge, and really that probably, in essence, cost Tampa Bay the game. To be perfectly honest with you, Evans was tremendous in this game. 7 receptions, 92 yards. McLaurin played well as McLaurin played well also with 7 catches, 89 yards. But again, the story of this game, again, was Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels just continues to play at a high level. He continues to be great for quarters. He continues to not let anything just be unflappable. He took some hits. There were some moments. He took some hits during his runs. Didn't let it get to him at all. Threw the ball relatively well, for the most part. Missed, could have had a touchdown on a play that he missed, that Collinsworth called out, that he should have probably let the pass go earlier. But for the most part, 24, 35, 268, 2 touchdowns. And again, most importantly, no turnovers, interceptions or fumbles in the game. And again, you're seeing a guy who just it just does not, the moment is just not too big for him. I mean, he has a very calm demeanor. He's in total control of the offense. I thought this was as good a job as they've done all season long of getting Terry McLaurin involved. They really, really tried to feature Terry McLaurin as they should have, especially when Tampa Bay's lost their top cornerback in Dean. So, and they certainly took advantage of that as well. So this is a huge win for this franchise, to say the least. Now, if they had lost this game, as long as they didn't get absolutely embarrassed, which I never thought it was going to happen, because I thought these were two basically evenly matched teams, and I thought that it would come down to the fourth quarter, possibly the last possession. But if they lose this game, then you get ready for 2025 season, go in the draft and free agency and whatever. It would have been a great season regardless, coming off a 4-13 season last year. But to win this game, really, it's major for this franchise moving forward, regardless of what happens next week against the Detroit Lions, because getting to the playoffs, it's not just enough to get to the playoffs anymore. With the expansion, you really need to win a playoff game to kind of call your season a successful season, especially when you start having Super Bowl expectations. And Washington, those expectations are going to skyrocket next year. They're going to go into next year. They will be the hunted, they're not going to sneak up on anybody next year. So this game was a big game. That's an extra playoff game for Jay Daniels. So he'll have 2 playoff games on the road, regardless of what happens next week. 2 playoff games on the road, and that's invaluable experience. And when you see a guy develop the way he's developed, when you see a guy how he handles the media, how he handles, in terms of leadership, in terms of how all the players talk about him, again, you're dealing with a special quarterback here. And to have that, I'm telling you, to have that guy you have that guy as the most important position in all the sports. There are teams in these playoffs that wish they had a guy like that who are going home that don't have that guy, and we'll talk more about that during the podcast. But Washington, without question, has that guy, and he is going to be around for a long time. And we'll see what happens. See what happens next week. We'll talk more about that in the divisional round. But Washington wins the game of the week. Exciting game, especially down the stretch in the fourth quarter. 2023 to 20. Um, Listen, Tampa Bay is Tampa Bay. I mean, Tampa Bay is a team that can beat anybody. They're a team that can lose anybody. Tampa Bay had one of those seasons where, yeah, I think if you're Tampa Bay, you walk away, you won a division. That's a tough, losing home playoff games are always tough. You want to take care of business at home, but I don't think anybody I don't think anybody, and Tampa Bay, by the way, was not a good home team as it was. They had lost 4 home games this season. They actually played their best football on the road. They had road wins at Philadelphia, and also they had a road win at Detroit as well. So Tampa Bay really played their best games, and they almost took out Kansas City in Kansas City. So Tampa Bay really played their best football on the road this year. They were not a good home team, and Washington certainly took advantage of that. This took advantage of that this evening. Deep dive the wild card weekend. So 3 games that came before the Washington game were all like double-digit victories by the home teams. The home teams, for the most part, dominated, and they were games where the home teams just ran wild as far as running the football, had controlled the line of scrimmage. We're gonna begin. I'll begin with today's game, with the Buffalo Denver game. Buffalo takes out Denver 31-7. You have a situation where Buffalo completely controlled this game outside of the first possession, where Denver went down the field and scored on their opening possession to go up 7-0. Buffalo would go on to score 31 unanswered points. Josh Allen was near perfect, 20 of 26 for 272 and 2 touchdowns. Buffalo goes 471 yards of total offense, 210 yards rushing. James Cook has another big day. In terms of the time of possession, they control that. 41 minutes. Buffalo had the ball for 41 minutes in the game and really flexed their muscle. Physically. Buffalo finally has a team that is built to play in cold weather. Remember, for years, even when Buffalo was going to the playoffs and winning 13 games a year, they were not a good bad weather team, which was wild considering that they play in Buffalo. So it is just within the last year or two that they have really settled into playing to the stadium, playing to the elements in terms of we can play anywhere. We can play. Our game can travel in terms of dominating the line of scrimmage with the running game. We're not going to allow Josh Allen to. We're not going to count on Josh Allen to throw the ball 40 times. We're not going to, we're going to depend on him at times with situational running and things of that nature. But they have really done a tremendous job of just shifting who they are as an offense. They are a power offense. They're a physical offense. Josh Allen's a physical runner. When he has the ball, he's looking to he uses his legs to create extra time to look to pass. So, and with the exception of design runs, he is looking to pass the ball, and they're looking to run the ball, play physical football. And yeah, we'll talk about this. We certainly will talk a little bit more about the showdown they have with Baltimore next week. In terms of hosting that game, but they are. This is like it's not the most talented Buffalo team. It's probably the least talented Buffalo team, but I would say this. They are, in terms of cohesion, in terms of the body language, in terms of you see it in terms of you don't hear anything in regards to any complaining in the locker room. You don't hear none of that shit this year with Buffalo. It's all happy feelings. They're all on board. They know who their best player is. They know who's a guy who I think is going to win the MVP. And they go in, they can beat anybody, and they've shown that they can beat anybody. Beat Kansas City, they beat Detroit in Detroit. So this is going to be a day. And their defense actually played well in this game against Denver after that first drive. Really shut Denver, in essence, shut them out after that first drive. So Buffalo complete control of this game, ran the ball. Josh Allen was Josh Allen, and to be honest with you, I don't think Bo Nix actually played bad. I actually thought Bo Nix made some plays. They just didn't have the ball. Like if somebody has the ball for 40 minutes in a playoff game, you're not going to unless your defense forces a boatload of turnovers. There's no way that you're going to win that game. Denver didn't have the ball. Denver got the most out of, probably overachieved. No one thought there's no way I thought Denver this year was going to be a playoff team. So from that standpoint, you give Sean Payton credit. They draft Bo Nix. They hit the jackpot on that. He looks the part of a franchise quarterback. They have some nice now. They have some nice pieces on the defensive side of the ball with a couple All Pro guys. With Surtain and the other guy, the linebacker. Or they have they have an excellent defense. And so I was getting to the quarterback. We know they led the league in sacks. So Denver is fine. I mean, Denver, the only problem Denver has is they're in the same division as Patrick Mahomes. And they're in the same conference with Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Patrick Mahomes, and Joe Burrow. So Denver, so from that standpoint, you gotta nail drafts and nail free agency. You got to be near perfect in terms of decision making, because the top of the AFC is just is a bloodbath. I mean, the AFC is an absolute bloodbath to compete in. But excellent year, certainly an excellent year for Denver. I did not know. There's no way that you could expect them to win this game going to Buffalo with a rookie quarterback. Buffalo has been great at home in the playoffs, especially during a wild card weekend. Now they've had a couple of losses in the divisional round that they certainly would want to forget about. But wildcard weekend, Buffalo has been almost nearly automatic, at home. And throughout the course of their great history, they've always been a great, great home playoff team. As far as Philadelphia Green Bay, really an ugly game to watch. Philadelphia wins 22-10. Um, this was I'm telling you right now, listen, Philadelphia fans are not going to like what I say about this game, but listen, Philadelphia, they won this game with their defense, special teams. They forced a fumble on the kickoff that really set the tone for the entire game. Green Bay actually never recovered from that. This game was right there for the taking for Green Bay. Green Bay, despite the fact that they lost, you lose the turnover battle by 4. You're -4 on the road in the turnover battle. You should get destroyed. Green Bay actually was in this game, even late in this game. They had opportunities in this game. Jordan Love was awful, but he did lose his left guard Elton Jenkins. That they never recovered from that. In terms of the pass protection, they couldn't protect Love. Love loses his receivers. He already came in with Christian Watson being down. They lose Dobbs and Reed over the course of the game. So it was just an avalanche of bad shit happening to Green Bay. Philadelphia ran the ball, was effective with running the ball, ran the ball, outrushed Green Bay 169-107. Really, Green Bay only had one effective offensive player, and that was Josh Jacobs, who had a tremendous game. To be honest with you, considering the circumstances that the rest of the offense struggled mightily. He had 18 carries for 81 yards and a touchdown. Including had one of the great runs that you'll ever see, where he almost scored a touchdown, and it really was reminiscent of like a Marshawn Lynch type run where he broke a number of tackles and really, again, almost got into the end zone before he even stopped short. But Green Bay ended the season playing like shit. And Pittsburgh out, Green Bay out. It's not like the NBA where you can turn on and off in the playoffs. Chances are, if you're playing like shit in December, that it will be, and you're fortunate enough to make it to the playoffs, it will be a short January, and that was the case with Green Bay. Green Bay, things start breaking down, especially in December. They go 0-7 against the top three teams in the conference. With all their losses came against Philly, Detroit, and Minnesota. You gotta beat those teams if you want to get to the Super Bowl. So they will have a very long off season. Listen, I look, everybody's down on Jordan Love. Jordan Love has immense talent. I still think Jordan Love is absolutely worth the money that you gave him. Um, they, you know, he has to get more consistent. Remember, this is only his second year as a starter in the league. Sat a couple years behind Aaron Rodgers, but this is only his second year as a starter. So you have to take that in consideration. I still think he has a ton of talent. And you listen, if you're Green Bay, offensively, I think you're fine. They have a number of young players at the receiving core. They have a Pro Bowl caliber running back who, in a lot of years, if not for Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, could have been played at an All Pro, at an All Pro level, made the Pro Bowl, and Josh Jacobs, a very good offensive line. And their defense, and frankly, their defense played their asses off today. Their defense helped Philadelphia to under 300 yards rushing. They Now Saquon Barkley could have broke the last run, but for the most part, they did a decent job on Saquon Barkley, and they shut Philadelphia's passing game down. And I want to tell you this, and I'll say this about Philadelphia. Philadelphia, listen, if you want to, as far as that passing game goes, listen, um, I understand Jalen Hurts hadn't played in like 3 weeks. You want to say it's some rust. You want to say that Green Bay defense had played well, had been playing great, especially over the last month or so. Have been playing really improved the second half of the season. Sure, that passing game better pick up come whoever they play, whether it's Minnesota or the Rams. They definitely will not beat the Minnesota. Um, if it is Minnesota, they definitely will not beat Minnesota with Jalen Hurts throwing for 131 yards. I'll tell you that right now. And will have zero chance if it is Detroit. If it is Detroit in the conference championship game. So you look at all the contenders that came into the playoffs. They were the least, by far, the least unimpressive out of all the contending teams that have played up to this point. When you look at Baltimore, look at Buffalo, look at those teams, how those teams played versus how Philadelphia played, how Philadelphia looked. Philadelphia did not look like a team today that can get to a Super Bowl. I'm telling you right, I'm just being honest with you. This Green Bay team was limping. This Green Bay team was ripe for the picking. And again, they were very fortunate that Green Bay just, just basically shit the bed in terms of with the turnovers and just sloppiness and just mental mistakes, stupid penalties by Green Bay, getting a couple of personal fouls after the play, but that was just bonehead, just dumbass plays on Green Bay. And Philadelphia will have to go up another notch if they want to take out either Minnesota, Detroit, or both. They won't beat either one of those teams playing like that. But when you are a complete team, which the Philadelphia Eagles are, you can afford for your quarterback to have a pedestrian day and not throw the ball well because you have a great defense. They have an excellent running game. So we'll see what happens next week when they Philadelphia when it happens next week when they play the winner again of Detroit and not Detroit, excuse me, but they play the winner of the Rams Vikings game. As far as yesterday goes, in regards to the I was shocked by the Houston what happened transpired in the Houston game. Uh I thought the Chargers would win a close game. Justin Herbert was awful in that game, to say the least. Um CJ Stroud again. You kind of gotta feel the same way about CJ Stroud that you do about Jaden Daniels. For all the talk about the regression, there was talk about regression in terms of CJ Stroud. I didn't see it. I like CJ Stroud. Remember, over the course of the season, CJ Stroud lost. There were times they lose Diggs, you lose Tank Dell, um, Then, you know, Nico Collins missed some time. So his receiving core was in shambles for the majority of the year. You lean on Joe Mixon. Mixon missed like 3 games. So they basically became a defensive team. And yeah, Stroud didn't throw the ball. His stats were not didn't have gaudy stats or by any chance, but but he was playing short-handed, like on the receiving core. Their receiving core was non-existent for the most part. There was no continuity because the guys were injured, and but they still won a division, got to the playoffs, and he clearly yesterday, clearly outplayed Justin Herbert, and Stroud for the second straight year wins a playoff game. So Stroud in 2 years, he's led the team to a division win, divisional titles, and back-to-back playoff wins. So he'll have, so he's 2-1 in the playoffs. So I think that we get caught, guys get caught up, fans get caught up in all these numbers and things of that nature, and you gotta really look at the circumstances and look at the full context of what's going on before you try to say that a guy is take a step back or regress. I'll tell you right now, CJ Stroud could play. They're about 25. There are about 20 teams that would like to have a CJ Stroud playing for them. So he leads Houston to to another playoff victory, another wild card victory. Of course, they destroyed Cleveland last year, and then again they got their asses handed to them by Baltimore. So they'll play Kansas City next week. As far as the Chargers go, listen, the Chargers, you make the playoffs. They had an excellent year. I'm not. Justin Herbert has had 2 playoff games to forget. A couple years ago, of course, they blew. They had a 31-0 lead, or had a 27-0 lead. They lost that to Jacksonville, and now he just had probably one of the worst games of his entire career. He's still a franchise quarterback. He's still a guy that you would want on your franchise. Listen, we know that they need more pieces on that team. We know that this is not like this is you're trying to change a culture. They have some talent on the offensive line. They are a physical team, but they need more weapons. They need more weapons on the offensive from an offensive standpoint. But I'm still a fan of Justin Herbert. Like I still think Justin Herbert is a guy who you is a franchise quarterback. But listen, he's going to get criticized. Same when guys, same as Lamar Jackson, same as guys who struggled at the beginning of their careers in the postseason. He's not immune to it, and so be it. People want to destroy him on online and what have you. The fan base, if you don't want to criticize him. That's fine. But I'll tell you what, you still want him on your team. Like, there's nothing about him that's overrated. So I'll say that. But when Peyton Manning was losing playoff games, we criticized him. So no quarterback is immune to it, especially if you struggle in the postseason. So I'll say that. But to me, was about it was about CJ Stroud. That game was about CJ Stroud and the Texan defense, which was tremendous in that game. So Texans advanced to play Kansas City, and of course you will have the showdown, the MVP showdown between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. In regards to the Pittsburgh Baltimore game, Baltimore treated Pittsburgh like a high school JV team. You talk about running the ball. they they rushed the ball for 299 yards. They absolutely toyed with Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was never in that game, even when the lead got cut, even when the lead was cut. Up to 14. Pittsburgh was never in that game. You look at you talk about getting outrushed 308 to 60. Um, Pittsburgh didn't cross the 50-yard line until the second half of the game. Baltimore, again, the Lamar Jackson Derrick Henry combination in terms of running the football is as lethal as we've ever seen at the out of the quarterback running back position with those two guys. At one point in the first half of that game, Baltimore ran the ball 15 straight runs. They had a 13 play drive that led to a touchdown, all runs in the all runs. And, some of the stuff that Pittsburgh started doing in the second half because Baltimore, basically kind of loosened up a little bit defensively. But for the most part, Pittsburgh couldn't do anything in that game, and they were never in that game. They were never in that game whatsoever. Um, Baltimore does what I expected them to do. I expected them to absolutely handle Pittsburgh. I predicted it would be 34-14. It could have been 34-14. They could have scored if they wanted to in their last possession. But here's what I'll say. Um, in regards to Mike Tomlin, in regards to Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh hasn't won a playoff game since 2016. Six straight playoff losses. Um, there are some that are calling for the head of Mike Tomlin as far as saying that, it's time for him to go, it's time to move on. Maybe you trade Tomlin for a high draft pick and so on and so on. Here's what I'll say about that. Speaking as a fan of a franchise that has, prior to this year, had been one of the worst run franchises in all of sports and had 2 decades basically of losing and double-digit losing seasons and what have you, and just been a complete shit show. Do not take for granted making the playoffs just about every single year, or being in contention to win a division every single year. If you don't have a MVP caliber or Hall of Fame caliber quarterback, you cannot compete in this league at a championship level. Pure and simple. Whoever wins the Super Bowl this year, or even gets to the Super Bowl this year, that quarterback is going to be either a guy who is a MVP caliber quarterback, Hall of Fame caliber quarterback, or a guy who is headed towards being who could be an all-time great. It's just that simple. Mike Tomlin has not had that since Ben Roethlisberger, like a decade ago. Not the Ben Roethlisberger that we saw in 2020, 2021, 2019. I'm talking Ben Roethlisberger like in 2015 or 2014, 2017. Maybe 2017 probably was his last great year. He hasn't had that, so it's been close to a decade since he's had that level of quarterbacking. You want to talk about maybe they need to shift more towards offense. They have the highest, they spend more money on defense. They have the most expensive defense in football in terms of how much they spend on defense. You want to talk about shifting some of that money towards spending on offense and what have you. Cool. It sounds great. It doesn't matter how much money they spend on the offense if you don't have a quarterback. So you can't tell me that guys like a Justin Fields or Russell Wilson or some of the quarterbacks they've had, Kenny Pickett, they struck out on him. Again, if you don't have that guy under center, then you have no chance in this league. You have no chance. Tomlin, for them to be 10-7 was a minor miracle and get to the playoffs. That was a minor. They were never when they were 10-3. I never viewed Pittsburgh as a contender. Even at 10-3, I never took them seriously. Never. And so it's like, yeah, I mean, they had some excellent wins. They had, they beat Baltimore at home. They beat Washington on the road. They had some nice wins early on in the season. But again, Russell Wilson has limitations. Period. At this stage in his career, he had a nice year. He was 16 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Completed 64% of his passes. He did what he could. He took him as far as that they were going to go. Pure and simple. Now moving forward, I think that they, if you probably want to go, you can try to draft a quarterback in the second or third round. There's nothing out there as far as the free agency. Like, I forget about it. Do you really want to go after Kirk Cousins? Sam Darnold, regardless of what happens, either is going to be franchised or he's going to sign a long-term deal with Minnesota. Minnesota's not, and Minnesota. No, they can try to make a trade for JJ McCarthy. Okay, but we don't know we don't know how good JJ McCarthy is. Like, we haven't seen him play. So again, I don't know what you want Mike Tomlin to do with no quarterback. Like I really like what do you in the AFC? I mean, think about how many quarterbacks. Think about the AFC. You have Mahomes, you have Lamar Jackson, you have Josh Allen, you have Joe Burrow, you have C.J. Stroud, you have Justin Herbert. Now you have Bo Nix. Bo Nix. I mean, that is like good luck. Good luck trying to. I mean, again, it was a minor miracle for them to make the playoffs this year. It really was. That team, you look at that team. That team's not a playoff team. So again, y'all, you can take Tomlin for granted until he leaves, and then you go 5 years where you don't sniff the playoffs. Like if I'm Mike Tomlin and I'm hearing this, I'm like, who's my quarterback? That's what I'm thinking. He can't say that, but I'm like, who? What are we talking about here? We don't have a quarterback. Yeah, we can spend more money on our offensive weapons, but it doesn't matter how much money we spend on offensive weapons. We got the most expensive receiver, offensive line, running back, but who's under center? And again, you could talk about organizational philosophy where they should be more of a they shift more of a again a passing team, an offensive team. Again, none of that shit matters if you don't have a quarterback. None of it matters. Now, if you want to knock them for not being able to develop or find a quarterback in the draft, then that's the criticism. Because you should be able to find a quarterback in the draft because, you know, every couple of years there are at least 3 to 4 quarterbacks that are coming out these drafts and they're becoming quality starters. So you should be able to find a competent franchise caliber quarterback in 2025. But again, Roethlisberger retires in what 2021. That's his last year. Finding that next guy, like I said, it Miami Dolphins are still looking for that next guy. They're still looking for. I mean, they think Tua is very good, but I don't. I mean, I don't know if Tua is going to be around for Tua. He might have a 4 or 5 year career with the injuries. The Bears, like Caleb Williams has talent, but the Bears have never found that quarterback. Never. Think about that in their history, forever. Yeah, like when the Bears have a quarterback, like it's hard. Like again, their franchises, they are still looking for that guy. For that guy, Cleveland is still looking for that guy. But the Pittsburgh fans, football fans in general will not miss Tomlin, will not appreciate Mike Tomlin until he's gone, until he's no longer coaching for Pittsburgh, and then you're gonna see, oh well, maybe we were a little bit hard on him. Now again, 6 straight losses is a lot. That's a lot of playoff losses. It is a lot of playoff losses in a row. But you know, some of those losses were to New England. They've had some bad ones, like Jacksonville, Cleveland. Cleveland was up. Like, I think Cleveland was up like 28-0 in that 2020. So they've had some rough ones. Like they've had some bad ones to say the least. But again, if you don't have a franchise quarterback, if you don't have a guy franchise Hall of Fame, all pro that, if you don't have that guy, then you're not going anywhere. You're just not. Indianapolis has not recovered from, Indianapolis thought they had that guy, Andrew Luck. He couldn't keep him healthy, and they're still looking for that guy. Have a solid roster outside that, but they're still looking for that quarterback. Real thoughts on the divisional playoffs before I let you go. Kansas City, Houston. I listen. Kansas City is my pick to go to the Super Bowl. My pick to win the Super Bowl. So I think you know that those couple of weeks off will Kansas City will be extremely fresh. I know Houston is feisty. I like we know, I love CJ Stroud, but that is a very, 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 very tall order going to that stadium with that team being a well rested, fresh Kansas City Chiefs team. Um, Washington, Detroit, again, that's another tall order. I'm excited to see Jaden Daniels go against that defense. Um, that Detroit offense right now is just can put up 40 in their sleep. Washington is going to have to score a boatload of points, minimum 30 points. They're going to score anywhere from 30, 35 points just to be in that game. They're going to have to take some risks and have to force some turnovers. Um, make Jared Goff beat them. They really have to control their running game, control Detroit, do their best to control Detroit's running game. And really what they're going to do is keep their offense off the field. That Washington's best defense against Detroit's offense is going to be controlling the time possession, to be honest with you. So that again, that's their only chance in that game, forcing some turnovers and forcing Jared Goff to throw the ball more than 35 times. Uh, wait, Philadelphia, Minnesota, the Rams. Philadelphia will absolutely beat the Rams without question. But Minnesota, that's a whole other deal. That would be if it's Philadelphia, Minnesota, that would be an absolute knockdown, drag out fourth quarter game because Minnesota is very good. Minnesota has some things that they can do against Philadelphia. They will not be in the least bit intimidated by Philadelphia whatsoever. They will not. Minnesota has a type of game that can travel on the road, but I still would like Philadelphia against either one of those teams. But especially if the Rams, the Rams will have little to no chance against Philadelphia in that game. As far as the number one game, a game that could really be a Super Bowl, considering how good those two teams are. Baltimore, Buffalo. Baltimore is the better team. Baltimore clearly is the better team, but I don't forget you could throw that 35-10 game in week 4, throw that out the window. That game means absolutely nothing. That game was in Baltimore. Baltimore absolutely had to have that game. They were at a critical time during their season. Um, they absolutely had to have that game. I mean, I think they were like 1-2 and Buffalo was 3-0 at the time. So that was like a borderline must-win game for Baltimore at that particular time of the season. So they played like a desperate team. That was in, I believe, late September. I want to say that was like the last week, late September or early October. But toss it out. That game means absolutely nothing. You saw, so you can just toss that game out. The game is in Buffalo this time around. And again, Baltimore absolutely should win that game. They have the better roster. They have more talent. They should win that. They should win that game. Should win that game. But it definitely, without question, be a 4-quarter game. That could be one of those games where whoever has the ball last. There's something special about this Buffalo team as far as the continuity, as far as the good vibes, the energy. So that would be a high scoring game. I expect the Baltimore Buffalo game would be a very, very high scoring game. I don't think either one of those defenses will be able to slow down those quarterbacks. I think those quarterbacks will have a chance to go wild in that game. It really will come down to it. Might come down to whoever has the ball last, to be honest with you. That's going to wrap it up for this special abbreviated edition of the Ril Dil Podcast. I will see you later on in the week with the mini podcast. So long.